Hi, it's Bishop Mark. Today is Luke chapter 5, verses 27 to 32. And it's the story of the conversion of Levi, who we know better as Matthew. It's important to talk about Matthew. Now, you remember that there's 4 Gospels and we are reading Luke, right? But there's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And Matthew is the same person who Luke is talking about today. Now, Luke calls him Levi, and that's because Matthew's name, either it's a different translation, but more likely, he changed his name. Maybe Jesus changed his name. We don't have proof of that. But Jesus changed names. He changed Simon to Peter, right? And Matthew itself means gift of God. So it seems likely that he changed his name after recognizing that he had gifts for God. But when we take up this story in Luke, Matthew is Levi, and he's a tax collector. Now, taxes are part of life, right? Your parents pay taxes. Those who are watching this pay taxes. I pay taxes. And so I have no objection to paying. But in that time, taxes were different. The taxes we're talking about were taken up by the Roman soldiers, the Roman hierarchy, Caesar. And they were taxing the Jewish people who land they had taken. And so this was a Jewish person working with the enemy, the Roman person, to collect taxes from Jewish people. So what do you think the Jewish people thought of the Jewish people who were working with the Romans? They didn't like them. They didn't like them. And some of them were cheats. Some of them were asked for too much. And so tax collectors were seen as the very bad, the worst. So that's who Matthew was. Matthew, who went on to be an apostle of Jesus and who went on to write the Gospel of Matthew, he started out as a tax collector and a hated person named Levi. Okay, let's hear this story in Luke's Gospel. After this, he went out and saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at the custom post. So, Jesus is passing by and he sees Levi, who we now know as Matthew. And the customs post meant he was working. He was collecting taxes. So, once again, the Jewish people of Jesus was one, would hate Matthew, Levi, not even knowing them, just because of their job. And yet, Jesus doesn't see him as someone to avoid. Jesus notices him as a person, child of God. If you go with the name Matthew, a gift of God. Okay, so Jesus notices the tax collector where everyone else would walk by with disgust. Jesus notices him and he says to him, "Follow me." Wow. That's what he said to Peter, James, and John when they were at the shore with their nets, right? "Follow me." And Matthew began to follow Jesus, but he became an apostle. No rabbi, no Jewish priest, no Pharisee or scribe for sure would ever bring a tax collector to follow them. But Jesus is unafraid. He knows what's in Matthew's heart. He probably saw Matthew looking at him and intrigued with his talking. He might have seen Matthew going near the synagogue. I bet he knew Matthew ahead of time. It doesn't say that here, but I bet Matthew's been looking at Jesus for a while. Anyway, Jesus sees his eye. He says, "Follow me," right from his work. Okay. And leaving everything behind, he got up and followed him. So isn't that amazing, the power of Jesus Christ? When he says follow, people drop everything and they follow. Even a tax collector, even Levi. Sometimes it's you and me. We are going in one direction in life, and we know that Jesus is calling us to another direction in life. We have to leave that life behind and follow where Jesus wants us to follow. I was, at some point in my life, I wasn't a priest. I wasn't a bishop, wasn't a priest. And I was thinking what to do, and I felt a strong call to follow Jesus as a priest. And I left my old life behind, and I followed Christ. I never looked back. I've always been a happy priest, because I know that's what Jesus wants for me. So don't be afraid, even if you find yourself in a bad place like Levi did, to follow the Lord, follow Jesus, right? Okay, let's continue reading. Then Levi gave a great banquet for him in his house, and a large crowd of tax collectors and others were at table with them. So Levi/Matthew is so happy that he has a great feast for Jesus. You know, there's a lot of eating in the Bible. There's, especially after conversions. You notice that Jesus was unafraid to eat, and he didn't care who he ate with. The Pharisees, the scribes, would not want him eating with tax collectors. But Jesus was celebrating that Levi, was going to follow him. And the first thing that Levi does is he spends his money. Now, he took it from the Jews anyway. So he's spending his money on Jesus. He's giving a feast. So Jesus goes. Okay, here come the Pharisees and the scribes. The Pharisees and the scribes complained to his disciples, saying, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" Now, there's a word in that sentence that we haven't talked about before, and that word is disciple. So, let's define disciple. So, there are apostles, and then there are disciples, and then there are their crowds. So, apostles are specific people, there were 12 of them, who Jesus chose to follow him. But the disciples were followers of Jesus, just not apostles. So they were people that followed him. Then there were the crowds. Lots of people followed at a distance. But the disciples were already following Jesus, people who hung around him. They were called the disciples. And the Pharisees and the scribes say to the disciples, "What's wrong with Jesus? He's eating with the tax collectors." So Jesus answers, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" Jesus said to them in reply, "Those who are healthy do not need a physician, but the sick do. I have not come to call the righteous to repentance, but sinners." So what's Jesus say? He says, those who are sinners, those who are sick, they need me. Why would I avoid them? Levi, Matthew, the tax collector, was in a great, terrible space in his life where he was hated and he was sinful, and so Jesus wanted to be with him. He was converting people. He was changing people's lives. And so he says, if people are sick, not sick, they don't go to the doctor. The doctor never sees them. But if they're sick, they need a doctor. I'm a doctor, says Jesus. I heal people, inside, outside. I heal people. And so you can, when you're feeling trapped, if you are in a bad situation, you can go to the doctor, Jesus Christ, who will heal you within if you pay attention to his instructions and you can follow. Even if you get some time in your life, which I hope never happens, that you're as low as Levi, you can become Matthew, the gift of God. Peace.